Hello and welcome to our Parish Catalyst webinar series and our webinar today on leadership development. My name is Felipe Sanchez and I am the Executive Director of Parish Catalyst. And we are so grateful that you've taken this time to be with us here today. We know that your time is valuable and we want to do our best to give you a great webinar. We have people joining us today from all over the country and even Europe, and our first ever webinar participant from Africa. So welcome. And these last few months of hosting these webinars, we've really got to know some of our webinar participants and been able to interact with you. And we know that you are committed to making your parishes thrive. And I want to let you know that we are committed to helping you do that. We want to do our best to help you in that area. During our last webinar, we put up a poll and we just asked, how can we serve you? You know, what do you want? And the overwhelming response was leadership development. We know that you as an audience valued leadership development and wanted to grow more in that area. And so we put together a really great webinar for you today. In a moment, I'm going to introduce our facilitator, but first I just wanted to ask you to interact with us, whether it is the chat bar or the comment section if you're watching this video on YouTube, or you could simply drop us a line at info@parishcatalyst.org. Our facilitator today is John Poitevin, and he's the Director of Facilitation for Parish Catalyst. He's worked with churches all over the country in this area of leadership development. And I want to hand it over to John, who's going to guide us through our webinar today.
Thank you, Felipe. And it's good to be joining you today. We have several guests that are going to be with us as well that have done a lot of research and work in leadership development. We're going to learn from them. As I started researching this, as we had such a great demand for it, I was reading through Great Catholic Parishes, which is the book that Parish Catalyst was really founded through, the research that went into that. And the first chapter in the book is on shared leadership. So I thought nothing better than starting by talking to our co-founder, Bill Simon, about that research and about what he has discovered through it. So we're going to look at that now, and I'll be back with you in just a moment. Our first guest on our leadership development webinar today is the co-founder of Parish Catalyst and the author of Great Catholic Parishes, Bill Simon. Bill, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, John, and thank you to everybody who's listening to this webinar.
Would you start out by just sharing with us a little bit about your research for Great Catholic Parishes that was really the foundation for Parish Catalyst?
Sure. Claire Henning and myself, almost 7 years ago, it's hard to believe, I founded Parish Catalyst, and in the very early stages, we did a lot of research on vibrant Catholic parishes all over the country. We identified and interviewed 244 pastors, and it was really from those interviews that the book Great Catholic Parishes was born. We had a protocol of 31 questions in our interviews, and thankfully the pastors allowed us to tape the interviews and to transcribe them. You know, we had 3,600 pages of transcripts, and we took about 18 months analyzing those 3,600 pages. We came up with 49 findings. We were able to group those 49 findings into 4 practices. And basically those 4 practices are: great parishes share leadership, great parishes foster spiritual growth and a plan for discipleship, great parishes have an excellent Sunday experience, and fourth and finally, great parishes evangelize effectively.
Well, your first finding there, shared leadership, is so important that it is the first chapter in the book. And one thing that you start noting is that both Pope Francis and the Second Vatican Council really emphasize and encourage shared leadership. What did you learn from that?
Well, out of these 3,600 pages of transcripts, if I could boil that down to one word, I would say shared. If you give me 2 words for the 3,600 pages of transcripts, I'd say shared leadership. you know, the culture of the Catholic Church has changed significantly since the days of Vatican II in 1965. Pre-1965, I think there was a joke that many of us remember, and that is that the role of the layperson could be summarized in 3 words: pray, pay, and obey. There's nothing sharing about pray, pay, and obey. Today, 80% of our 244 pastors said that they share leadership. And basically, they share leadership in 3 different ways, because everybody's a little different. And some pastors shared leadership in a way that they delegated, so we call those delegators. And the second way is consultors. You know, about 40% of our pastors said that they shared leadership by consulting, you know, with many people. And the third type of leadership was collaborative. About 30% of our 244 pastors said that they share leadership by collaborating with a group of people. So this has been a systemic change in parish life.
Well, that collaboration part is such an important piece of the Parish Catalyst learning community process. And we see such great results that come out of pastors collaborating with the brilliant and gifted people that God has put in their parishes. One thing that you land on in shared leadership that I think is so important is that this new shared leadership helps improve the emotional, spiritual, physical health, the well-being, and the time management of the pastors. Why do you find that to be so important?
Well, you know, once again, if we go back to the days of old, you know, like 1965, there were plenty of priests, there were plenty of nuns, and there were plenty of brothers. There are not plenty anymore. It comes as no surprise to you, John, or to our audience, that there has been a dramatic decline in vocations. This is not the time or the place to discuss that at length, except just to note that the numbers are, you know, are much smaller. And since that time in 1965, which was kind of the peak, you know, when seminaries were overflowing, the number of Catholics has increased and the number of vocations has declined. So there's much more time pressure on pastors than there was, you know, even 30 years ago. So given those, you know, very significant time pressures, which once again, I'm not telling anything to the audience that they don't know already, but I think it underlines the importance of sharing. You know, there's a number of things that only a pastor can do or only a priest can do, sacramental duties. And there are other things that often a pastor or a priest will do that just take a lot of time, like preparing for a homily. Preparing for a homily could easily take a half a day to a day to get it in a place where, you know, the priest is comfortable. So in order to carve out plenty of time, you know, for priests and pastors to do the sorts of things that only they can do, they've got to share responsibilities with others, and it's happened to be principally lay people.
That's so true, and we do see, as your research shows, that 70% of these pastors you talked to said that they have found their personal health and well-being has improved, and the results in their parish improve. Thank you so much for this research that you've done, first of all, but also for your continued work in church renewal. And thank you for being with us here today. I really appreciate your insights. We're going to expound on all of these ideas a little bit more as we continue on in the webinar.
Thank you, John. And thanks to everybody in our audience again for tuning in. And obviously, if you ever have any questions, don't hesitate to contact us at Parish Catalyst. All the best, and God bless you.
What a great way to start our webinar, and it's a good foundation that we're going to unpack more throughout this time together. If we're going to talk about leadership development, we've got to start with the question really of what is leadership? What are we talking about when we talk about leadership? Because to a lot of people, leadership means different things. It may mean power, it may mean control, it may mean authority. But what is it in essence, and what is it in Scripture? What does it mean to be a leader? I love this quote from Susan Ward. She says, "Leadership is the art of motivating a group of people to act towards achieving a common goal." And there's a few things we have to recognize there, that leaders are people that work with people. Leadership requires the ability to work with people and motivating those people, but also having a goal. Where are you leading them exactly? And as the church, we have to start by looking at what is our goal. And at Parish Catalyst, we constantly talk about making disciples, because that is the call of the church. We weren't called to make moral people. We weren't called to make good citizens. We aren't even called to make good Catholics. We're called to make disciples of Jesus in the context of the Catholic Church. And this is our foundation for everything that we do at Parish Catalyst. And this is our foundation for leadership development also. I want us to, in our minds, make a few different shifts. And the first one I want us to make is I'll call a leader shift toward discipleship. And that's recognizing that we invite people into leadership. And when we do that, we are actually inviting them to step into a deeper level of discipleship. Above and beyond anything they may do as a part of leading, we are called to disciple them as leaders. And I believe as we disciple them, they will do for others what we do for them. We're shifting from this idea of managing workers, whether it be staff or key volunteers. They are not just workers we are called to manage. They are called people. They're people that we are called to disciple, and that has to be our first priority in their lives. Eric Geiger says that leadership development apart from discipleship always results in skills apart from character and performance apart from transformation. And how many times have I seen this, where people are in a role not because they are someone who is a good spiritual influence or even, I would say, a disciple, but they are someone who's good at getting a lot done, and they're a hard worker, and there may be some collateral damage in the process, but the end seems to justify the means. And I have had many pastors and leaders come to me and say, I have this one person I'm trying to figure out what to do with, but they just get so much done, I don't know how I would replace them. And that should be a concern for us, because it's not just about getting work done. It's about the bigger calling of making disciples. And are we discipling them? And are they discipling others? Those are the questions we should ask. So just once again, if I haven't reiterated enough, our calling is not to recruit people who will help us get more accomplished. Our calling is to make disciples. I want to look at 4 keys to creating a leadership development culture in your parish. And we say a culture because once something becomes a part of the culture of your parish, it's contagious. People experience it. It permeates every ministry of your parish. It's not just a value or just an aspiration. It truly is a part of the DNA of who you are. And I want to give you some steps towards doing that. And those are identify, invite, develop, and deploy. And I will unpack all of these over the next 45 minutes or so. Identify. What should I look for in a potential leader? Well, this requires us to make another shift. And that is that we're actually being selective in who we are looking for. We're not just looking for anyone who will say yes and take the job. We're making a shift from a mindset of scarcity to a mindset of selection. And I often hear people say, there's only a few people that do all the work. It's like a football stadium. There's a few thousand people watching, and there's 22 people that are actually getting things done. And that may be the case, but it doesn't have to be the case. And I think one reason is because we are not making the effort to identify, to interview, to ask around, to take people to coffee, to get to know them, to see who the true leaders are in our parish. And I believe that God has placed the people in your parish that are needed to accomplish the goals and purpose that he has called you to. So some leadership characteristics to look for. First one is a desire to serve, then teachability, relational IQ, and having a transformational vision or a transformational mindset. And I'll unpack those as well. A desire to serve. This may seem basic, but a desire to serve is foundational for being a good leader. A desire to serve however needed. I heard Lauren Cunningham say that when he looks for a leader, he's looking for someone who is just as willing to scrub the toilets as they are to be in charge. And that is someone who's truly what we would call a servant leader. And a servant leader is the example that we have in Christ. Christ, the greatest leader of all time, washed the feet of his disciples. He performed the most humble act of service in any home at that time, which was traditionally performed by the lowest servant. And as we look for good leaders, we want to look for people who have that humble desire to serve however needed. Teachability as well, because all of us are growing in this. None of us are perfect. We're all getting better. We want to lead people who are teachable, and we want our leaders to exhibit this to the people who follow them. These are people that receive feedback well. They actually ask, how am I doing? They're people that will make a personal effort to get better at what they're doing. And there's really one word that sums all of these first two points up, and that's humility. We're looking for humble leaders. Relational intelligence is incredibly important. As I said earlier, leaders work with people. And to be a good leader, you really need to be good with people. Leaders need to be people that understand and are sensitive to the needs of the people around them. They're empathetic. They communicate in a way that is gentle and not harsh. They are people that other people want to be around and feel safe around. And the definition of relational intelligence is the capacity to connect with other people with skill, warmth, authenticity, and compassion. And this is what we're looking for in the people that we want leading others at our parish. And then lastly is a transformational mindset versus a transactional mindset. I don't know about you, but I love home renovation shows. And I love seeing a house go from run down and abandoned. They had a hard time even convincing the people to buy it. But then they transform this place into something beautiful that is beyond what anyone could have hoped or imagined. When we invite people into leadership, we want to look for people who have a transformational vision to anywhere that they serve. They're wondering, how can we make it better? How can we improve? They want to evaluate. They're not afraid to look at what could be improved and what could be done better. Transactional people are good workers, but they just want to show up and do their part of the job and leave. And you could look at it in the way that a house is renovated. Transformational people are the designers and the general contractors, right? They have a big vision for what this thing could become. Transactional people are the workers in different trades that all they do is come in and put up the wall. That's all they do. They don't do the plumbing, they don't do the electricity, and likewise with people in other areas. That's okay for someone serving in a specific area in our parish. But when we're looking for leaders, we want to look for transformational people who see what could be and strive for that. At Parish Catalyst, we often refer to Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. And he there shows how organizations that have excelled beyond all of their competitors have leaders who are not just content with being good at what they do, but they strive for greatness. Our second piece to leadership development is invite. How can I better engage new leaders? And that word invite is key. I hope it becomes a part of all of your vocabularies, because inviting is so much better than recruiting. Recruiting has a corporate feel, a military feel. It's almost compelling people into service, and not necessarily service that they're eager to do. Inviting is personal. Inviting connects with someone and ask them to join you in something. So I want to ask you to just remove this recruiting word from your vocabulary completely. It is not warm, it's not welcoming, it doesn't communicate relationship, which is what we're getting at here. These two numbers are important because they are significant to the success of you engaging new leaders and new volunteers in your parishes. 7% is the percentage of people in the general population who will say yes to a public ask to be involved in something. So whether it be the pulpit, a bulletin, social media, and email, only 7% are likely to say yes without any kind of personal interaction. And half of those people are people you do not want leading. Have you experienced this? You just put a public out there and so I'm not so sure I want them working in that area of ministry. And then how do you backpedal from that? 80% is the percentage of people who say yes to serving when asked by someone they know in a way that shows significance and value to them. This is a leader or a priest or a pastor going to someone they know and saying, I see you serving in this ministry. I see where you could be a blessing to our parish there. Would you prayerfully consider being a part? And when we do that, the language we use is very important. We want to ask people to serve with us, not for us, right? They're not just serving for the parish. They're serving along with us. We're partnering together in ministry. We want them to have a sense of community in serving. And then we want to communicate from a point of want, not of need. We tell people that I want you to serve in this way because I see in you the gifts and the calling and the heart that would be a blessing in this ministry to our parish. As opposed to the need announcement. Have we heard this? For some reason, it's almost always in the nursery or in childcare. But we are desperate for volunteers in this area. Will you please serve? And when you hear that announcement enough, you realize that must be an awful place to serve because they can't keep anyone. We really want to communicate from a place of selection, from a place of value, not a place of desperation. Language is incredibly important when we invite people to serve. So when you ask someone, you want to make it personal. In person, face to face is the absolute best way with the highest rate of return. Want to make it meaningful. We want to communicate. Who are they? Why do we desire for them to serve in that area? And how will it be a blessing both to their life and to the parish as they serve in that area? And then lastly, we want to be clear. What are we inviting them to? Talented, busy people will not say yes to a vague request. They know better. And so we want to give, I think it's necessary to have a job description for every leadership and staff position in your parish, every leadership volunteer position. And I truly believe it's best to have a job description for every area of serving in your parish, in any ministry. Because when you're asking anyone to serve at any capacity, they need to be clear on what's expected. And that clarity, that job description needs to explain what are the requirements for the job? Like what are their job requirements that would make them someone you would likely choose? What's expected in serving in this role? Why is it meaningful and fruitful for their life and for the parish? And then what is the time requirements and what's the season of service in this role? I really encourage parishes whenever possible to have seasons of service, that people agree to serve for a selected period of time. And then at the end of that time, they can have a conversation with whoever is over them in that area. And they can both decide if it's the best fit for them to continue to move on and serve in that area. It's helpful for the parishes because they're people you do not want serving for the rest of their lives in that area. You may do a circle back with them 6 weeks after they start serving just to see if it's a good fit. But it's helpful for people saying yes because they know that it's not a life commitment to this ministry. I've heard people say they felt like they had to leave the parish to stop serving in a ministry. We don't want that to happen. Everyone has different seasons of life when they're more busy or less busy, So we want to talk with people and make it clear, hey, here's an exit ramp if you can't serve, but also here's the amount of time we need you to serve for it to be fruitful. In some roles, you need longer commitments of a year, maybe even 2 years if it's leading a significant ministry. But others, where people are leading greeters or leading a small group even, it can be a much shorter period of time. By taking time to identify and personally invite people, you will produce leaders who are gifted, faithful, and committed to the vision of the parish. Before we go any further, we've got 2 more points that we want to hit. I want to give Felipe a chance to share with you about our learning communities. Bill mentioned these earlier in his segment, and Flip, will you just unpack this for us a little bit and tell us what it's about?
Sure, John. Well, we've talked a little bit in this webinar about discipleship development and leadership development, and we know that those things take hard work, and when you're changing a culture, it also takes time. And so a learning community isn't a one-time conference, it's a process. It's a process of 4 meetings over 18 months where you're walking with about 10 other parishes to this goal of discipleship. And when we look at the parishes that are doing it well, we know that they have a plan. They have a plan for welcoming people into their parish, for inviting them into ministry, for helping them grow as disciples and as leaders, and ultimately a plan for sending them out. And so what we do is we walk the parishes through this process of creating a plan, and they're with other parishes who have the same vision, the same goals, and they're able to help each other out.
Well, it's been such a great journey being a part of learning communities and facilitating them, and seeing how over 18 months things can really be accomplished. I think we often underestimate what we can do in the long term, but we overestimate what we can do in the short term. So maybe if you've tried short-term fixes to revitalize your parish and been discouraged, it's because this kind of work takes time to getting parishes on board, culture change, getting the right people on the team, but also the collaboration piece of working with other parishes along the way and learning from them, learning from each other is invaluable. So if you are ready to make a significant stride in your parish in making disciples and bringing revitalization and renewal, hope that you will reach out to us. Again, it's parishcatalyst.org is the website. You can learn more about learning communities there. I also want to share with you about our on-site workshops. If you're not ready for that kind of commitment of 18 months, an on-site workshop is where we come to your parish for a weekend, and we facilitate the very same kinds of learning and strategic planning process that we do in our learning communities. And we can do this around all different areas at your parish, whatever your needs are. We've done them on growing volunteers, on thriving small groups, on extraordinary hospitality, on community impact, and on making disciples. I've also done one on pastoral succession. We've done them on, we did a community roundtable at a parish about the future of the parish that gave people a chance to speak and to share ideas in a healthy format. And there were a lot of great things that came out of that. So if you think you might be interested in bringing Parish Catalyst to your parish, again, visit our website, parishcatalyst.org, for more information on our on-site workshops. All right, we'll get back to the last 2 areas of leadership development that we want to focus on, and that is develop, is the third one. And that is where we really get to the work of enriching the lives of these people who have said yes to serving. So how do we help people grow in leadership? Well, I love this quote from Simon Sinek, and it's another shift that we need to make. And it's a shift of not seeing leaders as just people that are in charge, but it's about taking care of the people in our charge. And so if we are a top level leader, if we are a pastor or a priest or a top level staff leader, we want to look at those who serve under us that are in leadership roles first and foremost about how can we develop them as leaders and develop them as people? How can we invest in their lives, not just assign duties to them to fulfill? So I see two ways that we do that, and they're not necessarily exclusive of each other, but I want to just identify both so we can focus on them. And that's leadership development and spiritual development, which we would call discipleship. And leadership development is an investment in people, not just investing in what they can do for you, but investing in them for their life, for every area of their life. I heard from a leader recently who did a retreat for his staff and his key volunteers that had nothing to do with the specific area they served in. It was just to help them dream for their own futures and be equipped for pursuing goals in their own personal lives. And in that way, he was investing in them as people, but it also made them better leaders in the areas that they serve. I love this quote from J.W. Marriott, and Marriott is known for having just a vibrant staff culture, and you can see it in their mission statement here, where he says, motivate them, train them, care about them, and make winners out of them. We know if we treat our employees right, they'll treat the customers right, and the business will take care of itself. You know, our business is making disciples. And if we motivate and train and make winners out of those people who are leading that across our parish, we know that they will pass those things on down to the people who they serve over, and that discipleship will happen organically and naturally because it's a top-down endeavor. I talked with Father Michael Saparito. He is from the parish community of St. Helen in Westfield, New Jersey. And he was in our first Parish Catalyst learning community. And Father Michael, in his strategic plan at their final meeting, said that our top priority is getting the right staff and leaders on board and investing in those people and developing them. So I asked him to share with us just a little bit about what that looks like in his parish.
All right, Father Michael, thank you so much for being with us today. Appreciate you taking time to share with us what you've been doing in leadership development in your parish. And first question is, specifically in the area of leadership, developing leaders, helping build people in their gifting in the area that they serve, what have you been doing in that area of development?
Well, thanks, John, for the opportunity to be here and to share that with you. I think it's kind of twofold. I think we realized that we really desired to have both how do we work better as a team piece of it, and how do we also look at either best practices or things that we want to do. So I guess I'll answer that question in those two ways. I think first, as a team, we recognized that we needed to have staff meetings that were more engaging, that they weren't just about comparing our calendars and things. So I know one of the books that we used was Pat Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And I know that what I did is that I simply just bought the book for everyone. And in addition, and we read the book, and there was an exercise book that went along with it. And we did a little bit of that, and I know Pat has produced some videos as a result of that. So we would kind of take those little pieces at a time and try to get us to think differently about how we work together, and to try to employ some of the ways that Pat suggests. And as he says very, very clearly in his book, it's very easy to read. It's a lot harder to implement. And I think we're always learning and growing, but I think that was very, very helpful to us. On the other side of ministry things, using kind of the same thing, I encourage our staff people. Sometimes we have shared an experience or a conference together, more local ones. Sometimes the further away ones, we can only send a couple of people at a time. But I think like more local experiences of good workshops that are talking about discipleship or things that we want to be able to do together. And so we would take our team together to experience those things. We've done that with, Rebuild conferences or whatever that were within driving distance for us. And what we did was just spread out as a team to get the most out of the conferences, tell people to go to their, workshops in their area of ministry and to hear what's going to be said and to take, really good notes. And what we do is we've shared those notes when we've gathered back together and learned from the sharing of the things, hearing people talk about it. And then we've recorded them. And of course, we come up with a whole lot more ideas than you could ever implement in, one period of time. But this is where some of the information from processes that we learned at Parish Catalyst came into place about this, discovering what's the most important things that we need to accomplish. How do we move from where we are now to the place that we want to be? What are the steps that we need to take? And then outlining who's responsible, the time frame, how are we going to measure that we've actually accomplished those things? And that moved us from just saying, hey, that was a great conference to go to making them a reality as part of our parish. Sometimes we followed it up simply by reading the book, reading a book that would be about parish renewal, or pieces of it where we took things. We do homily series here at St. Helens, so I took pieces that would describe what is the purpose of a homily series? Why would we consider using this? And then we would share it together with everyone to try to get them on board with why it is that we're doing the things that we're doing. Because once we understand that, we can plan better around it. And so I think in each of those different ways, and these are always works in progress all the time, of course, but in those ways, we're kind of developing ourselves as a team of working together, learning to work together more broadly instead of just in our areas, and also learning and growing through examining, best practices and things. And then also I encourage my staff people here to, if they come along something that's just in their field that they want to go, if the youth minister says, here's a great workshop coming up and I think this is going to be really good, can I go? We try to give our staff people an opportunity to do those things on their own too. And every time that they do and go out to something, we don't just let them go and say, hey, enjoy the conference. But when they come back, they always tell us a little bit about what their experience is, so that can help to benefit us all.
Good stuff there. I want to just revisit kind of the ways that he mentioned. And one is one-on-one, connecting with people one-on-one, having a cup of coffee, asking, how are you doing? How can I serve you better as your leader? Leaders always need to know that there's someone above them that has their back, that's supporting them, encouraging them. Want to do that. Staff meetings. I encourage you to make your staff meetings not just a bunch of just task-oriented discussion, but make them something that's meaningful, inspirational, developmental in the lives of your people. As he said, videos, books, workshops, conferences, and lastly, as I mentioned earlier, a leadership retreat. Take them on a retreat to do some work, have some fun, get to know each other better, but also to develop them and invest in them. So these are all great ways to develop your leaders. I think one thing that you will see consistently in all of these is it does require an investment. You cannot improve any area of your parish or make it great without an investment. And that is an investment of money, but it's also an investment of time and of relationships. But if we want to have great parishes, these are the things that we need to invest in. The second part is spiritual development or discipleship. And that's because we can't lead people somewhere that we are not going ourselves. And the staff should be the leaders, not just in organizing and running things, but should be the leaders in discipleship and where the parish is going. And I know sometimes this is not possible with the people that we currently have on our staff and in our leadership roles, but it's an area that we've got to lean into and invite them into because it is the only way for our parish to become a parish that makes disciples. Father Michael spoke with us a little more about how he has invested in his leaders spiritually.
Well, yes, I think one of the things, John, that's really good about this is that we recognized that if we're going to lead and make disciples in our parish community, that we ourselves need to do that. So one of the things we needed to do that as a staff. And so one of the things that we decided to do was our staff meetings are held on Mondays. That's just the day that works for us. And so we have everybody who works here, regardless of what their job is, on Monday at 1 o'clock, they stop. And we have 15 minutes of prayer that we gather all together, even if all of them aren't going to stay for the balance of the meeting. And what we've kind of done is, we've done different things through the years, just from simple praying prayers of petition to now we include scripture. Sometimes it's scripture and reflection. Sometimes it's music and spontaneous prayer. So, and sometimes it's a combination of all of those things. So we begin our meetings in that way. What we've incorporated now in recent years is in developing our small groups is, in addition to inviting our parish community to join small groups, we have established amongst ourselves as a parish staff the opportunity to have lunch together and also use the same small group materials that our small groups are using, particularly during the Lenten season. And this year I was happy to report that this is several years that we've been doing this now. I think 2 years that we actually did it formally. And we had, again, lunch together, an opportunity to use the same small group materials that all of our parishioners are using. And so when it ended this year, some people said, hey, can we continue this? And so that's a really great thing. We've also extended that, kind of beyond ourselves, John, to wanting to pray for the mission of our parish with all of our parish community. So monthly, we have an adoration service that includes music, spontaneous prayer, and silence, and in the context of Eucharistic adoration. And we do that once a month for the benefit of our parish. And we have seen it grown. Hundreds of people come to it. And we've really, really been pleased with how that's gone. And again, it just makes our whole community too aware that what's coming out from our staff is flowing out into our parish. So we're kind of developing our leadership also to lead in the ways of discipleship.
Great stuff there. And again, ways for spiritual development, the personal connection, one-on-one, just sit down with someone that's a leader and ask them, how are you doing? How can I pray for you? Another is team faith sharing. As he said, we do that every Tuesday here at Parish Catalyst for an hour. Before we do any business work or meetings at all on Tuesdays, we sit down, we read through the scriptures for that week. We have a faith sharing time, and then we have a time of sharing prayer needs with each other. And it has been so instrumental in forming us as a staff and as relationships and as friends working together and keeping our focus on the purpose and the meaning behind what we're doing. Another way for spiritual development is helping people reflect on how God is working in and through them in their area of ministry. So often we can get caught up in the tasks of ministry and even the success or what it produces, instead of asking the individual, how do you see God working in and through you as you serve here? It's very important to help people connect God's work to their work. Books and studies, as he said, Bible studies, and then a discipleship retreat. What if you took your leadership team on a retreat that was just completely spiritual, had no work significance, had no work agenda, but just create something that is refreshing and renewing for them. So the last one we have is deploy, and that is, how do we launch people out into leadership? We've identified them, we've invited them, they've said yes, we've invested in them. How do we really release them to be great leaders? And this is a key, because if you don't get this one right, you won't keep great leaders around. The first and most important thing is to give them vision. Michael Fletcher, in his book, Empowering Leadership, it's a fantastic book. He says, doers are driven by service, leaders are driven by vision. People that have that leadership personality and leadership gift in them, they want to see the future. They want to be inspired for where we're going. And we need to continually nurture that vision in them and draw that vision out of them. The vision is based on Ephesians 2:10, where we're told that God has created things in advance for us personally to do for his kingdom. And with our leaders, we want, again, to not have a mindset or a language of them working for us or even for the parish, but we want them to have a mindset that they're working for God, doing the very work that God created them to do. And once we've done that, we've given them a vision, we want to engage them in the planning and the dreaming. A leader doesn't want to just be given a list of assignments. A leader wants a chance to have a voice, a seat at the table, a part of planning that vision, and they probably have better ideas than we do. So it's just absolutely necessary for us to involve them in that process. And then we need to let them lead. We can't micromanage them. If you put a true leader in charge of something and you constantly micromanage what they do, they will be gone, because that's not how they were created. That's not what they were made to do. And to be honest, it's just no fun to work for someone who's a micromanager. So we've got to let go of our idea of perfection and humbly let go, knowing that our way may not be the best way, and give them some room to lead and fulfill the dreams and the plans that they've been a part of. So I think it was Dale Carnegie said that people will invest in a world that they've been a part of creating. And you'll see that same investment and commitment from your leaders when you give them a chance to design it and to lead it. So we'll just revisit our 4 keys to creating a leadership development culture. Want to create a culture where we identify, we look for leaders, we ask people who would be a good leader for this area. We get to know those people. We identify and recognize ourselves as we get to know them that this is a good fit. Then we invite them not to serve for us, but to serve with us. Not because we desperately need them, but because we want them, because of the gifts and talents and the heart that we see in them. Then we develop them, we invest in them, both spiritually and within their area of serving, and then we deploy them. We let them go. We help them, we guide them, but we give them freedom to plan and develop their own strategies, and we let them do what they do best. So if you want to rewatch this, it's on our YouTube channel, of course. And again, if you have any questions for us about learning communities, on-site workshops, or even just questions for us about what we're learning from parishes around the country, email us info@parishcatalyst.org. Flip, do we have any questions before we go today? Do we have any questions from anybody out there?
We do indeed, John. Our first question is, how do you deal with toxic people in leadership?
Wow. That's one I'm sure there's not anybody else out there that's got that question, right? You end up with toxic or unhealthy or just unhelpful people, either on staff or key volunteers that have been around forever. Sometimes we inherit them. Sometimes we just don't know what to do with them. And most often we're afraid. We're afraid of what will happen if I confront them. What will be the fallout from that? They have friends too. What happens if they don't receive this well? Most of the time, we're pretty certain they're not going to receive it well because of the type of person that they are. I think what we should be more afraid of, what is the ongoing collateral damage of them being in this role? The people that walk away and don't want to serve because of them, people that leave our parish because of them, the people that avoid our staff, staff that avoid other staff members. How much time are people spending working around this person or just trying to avoid dealing with them? So what do you do? Well, first, you should be doing ongoing evaluations with all leaders. So it should be either quarterly or twice a year where you sit down with them personally and talk about their area of service, how they're doing, if there's any way you can serve them better, but also them giving feedback and you giving them feedback on how they're doing. So when it comes time to tell someone that they're not a good fit for leadership any longer, that should never be your first difficult conversation with them. So I guess I would rewind by saying, start making sure you're having evaluations with everyone in leadership on a regular basis that they're aware of. These need to be kind and loving and gentle, but they need to be honest. Secondly, when it comes time that you have to have that difficult, courageous conversation, I encourage you to do it sooner rather than later, because chances are, if it's that bad, everyone that's around them has been waiting for you to have this conversation. And they are probably somewhat resentful towards you for causing them to continue to work in this toxic place, this toxic area or ministry, and not doing anything about it. I've heard it said when you encounter someone like this who's either incompetent or toxic or unhealthy, it's always because there was a leader who was unwilling to have a difficult conversation. And I would have to say that's true. So there's no easy answer to this one other than do it soon, be consistent. And I think once you've done this, you will realize that the results are far better than you ever imagined. And you are better off for handling the situation.
Great. Our second question, John, is do you have any suggestions to help leaders who have served for a long period of time to step down and make room for new leaders?
Well, this also comes into this complaint that it's the same people doing all the work. One reason for that is often because we have leaders who don't want to let anyone else do the work. They have a sense of entitlement and a sense of identity wrapped up in this area of serving. And it's just, frankly, it's not healthy. So again, I recommend seasons of service. No one should ever just lead a ministry in perpetuity. Just because they started it doesn't mean they get to lead it until they die. And also, I would recommend creating a leadership culture where people raise up mentors. And we have a whole nother talk and teaching we do on developing a mentor relationship or a mentor model for ministries. But leaders should always be looking for who can I equip and prepare to take my place. That's how healthy leaders think. And so we want to encourage that and create that in our parish culture. And you may need to do it as a requirement that leaders in ministries only serve for X amount of time, and then they invite someone else to take their place.
Great. Well, our last question today, John, is you talked about engaging your leaders in dreaming. Do you have any suggestions for or exercises to help them do that?
Well, there's quite a few that we do at Parish Catalyst. One would be just to, what people would call a SWOT analysis, where you just sit down with your leaders and you ask them what's working, where are we struggling, what are opportunities you see of new things that we could do, and what are you uncertain about? Where can we help you figure something out where you're just not even sure what to do with it? Those are some basic questions for evaluating and dreaming. But you also just might have them sit down and write out, where would you like to see this ministry 5 years from now? What would it look like if you left our parish, let's say you moved to another city, and you came back 5 years from now, and this ministry was doing above and beyond what you could have ever hoped or imagined? What would that look like? We even have an exercise that we call a postcard from the future, where if someone were to be a part of this ministry 5 years from now and they were going to write you a thank you note, what would it say? And those kinds of exercises help people think outside of the present, dream about the future, imagine what it could look like. And then you can begin to, as Father Michael said, build a strategic plan with steps and goals and owners of those things and deadlines for those things that help get you where you want to go.
Well, great. Those are all the questions we have today, John. I wanted to mention one last thing, and you had Bill Simon on talking about the book, Great Catholic Parishes, and we want to make that book available to any pastors who are in the audience. So you could email me at flip@parishcatalyst.org, or if you are not a pastor and you want to get a book to your pastor, there's a section on our website, which is www.parishcatalyst.org, to nominate your pastor, and we'd be happy to send him a copy of that book.
That's great. I encourage you to do that. It's, especially as a free resource, is pretty amazing. Also on our website, there are some studies for the book, both for staff and pastors. They're free resources where you can study with your staff as you read the book, study with your key leaders, their study guides. So consider making use of those as well. In closing, I just want to let you know our next webinar is June 11th. This is another hot topic that virtually every parish that we work with says, how do we keep families engaged between the sacraments? Those families that are outside of our core parish community, but they come for the sacraments and then they're gone. And how can we keep them involved? And a lot of it has to do with our sacramental prep. Is it something that would make them want to keep coming back? Is a good question. But we're going to talk with some parishes around the country that are doing some innovative things to connect with these families and get them engaged in their parish and help them become a part of regular parish life. So that's June 11th. You can register for that on our website now, and I hope that you will join us then. Thanks for joining us today, and God bless.